All right, welcome to the Tangent. We are here today with Devin.
Hey, how's it going?
My brother Tim.
Hey.
And today we're going to talk about Star Wars. I know it's such a large topic, so we're going to cut it short and talk about just basic theory.
Yeah,
we're canon, uncanon, stuff like that.
Yeah, we're not necessarily going to dig super deep into the structure of every single movie and crap on what we do like or we don't like or
this is not so much a review. It's just sort of an introduction to backstory and things for Star Wars, how the Force works versus how people think it might work, or
right.
Maybe...
So that's a good topic to start with, is the Force. I know in one of the movies they talk about metachlorians or whatever the heck, metachlorians,
however you
want to say that stupid word.
They're like Force juice. The more of it you got, the more force that you can. Use,
but I think they kind of disbanded the whole what metachlorians are in the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Well, what they did was they clarified what metachlorians were, because in Episode 1 they mention metachlorians, but they don't really talk about what they are. They just sort of insinuate that a higher metachlorian count is more force sensitive.
Yeah.
In the Clone Wars, they kind of frame it as the Force is a thing. Midichlorians are kind of like receptors.
Right.
And the more receptors you have, the easier your connection to the Force is.
Well, it can be.
It can be, right. The easier connection you have. So, like, Anakin has a high number of midichlorians, so he accesses the Force easier than someone like Obi-Wan does.
But
Obi-Wan trains more and uses his receptors, so it's sort of like more receptors versus more efficient receptors.
So it's not really saying that the more you have, the more powerful you are. It's just it's
easier access
to what it is.
Yeah, I mean, because we kind of see that. I mean, obviously Yoda is mentioned before. In Phantom Menace, he's mentioned about how, oh wow, this kid's metachlorian count is even higher than Master Yoda's, which shows that, like, obviously your connection can make you stronger with using the Force, because Master Yoda has a high metachlorian count and he's at the top of the council, but at the same time Anakin having more than he does.
There was I enjoy this point because in one of the behind-the-scenes sort of making-of documentaries for Episode 3, they go into kind of their thought process for making the fight scene at the end between Obi-Wan and Anakin. And their thought process was Obi-Wan doesn't have as good or clear of a connection to the Force as Anakin does, because he doesn't have the high metachlorian count. But as a result of his innate lack of natural talent, he trains more and he spends more time training and he works harder at it, versus Anakin, who just sort of does everything based on his natural talent. And they use that as a sort of framing device to show, like, the difference between someone who's naturally talented at whatever versus someone who has a drive toward improving themselves in that area. So you could honestly put that toward, like, anything like sports or whatever, where someone who's naturally talented will have an easier start versus someone who works hard and may not be as talented but can achieve more because they just spend more time and work harder.
Yeah. Well, one thing I can praise, now that we've discussed the whole what midichlorians really are and the whole connection to the Force, one thing I can praise about the prequels, meaning Episode 1, 2, 3, is it shows exactly what you just said in Anakin. Everything that he does is kind of just like this is just what needs to happen, what I feel like doing. Right. It's kind of like he's going on a whim and acting on kind of like what the Force is telling him to do.
He does everything off the seat of his pants.
Yeah.
And Episode 2 is actually as much as I don't care for that movie, it is a good explanation of what he does.
Yeah.
He doesn't think about things beforehand. He doesn't work hard at things, really. He just sort of goes. He moves forward and expects to succeed.
He's a slow learner because he's so naturally connected to the Force, and that's why that line with him and Dooku, you know, I am a slow learner. It's like, it was kind of like a BA little thing to say right there, because we know that Anakin is just all emotional connection to the Force, kind of.
Yeah, they even show that in the first episode 1 in the pod racing, and how he's the only human that could pod race, because he doesn't actually use his own what is it, the eye-hand coordination or the reaction time. So he actually can see, and I'm going to say this in a weird sense, is he can see the future, because the Force allows him to see what's going to happen before it happens, so that he can react to it in a different way.
And even so, he'd never won a pod race before episode 1.
Because he flies by the seat of his pants and does things a little rashly.
Yeah, they illustrate that very well in the pod racing scene, and that, honestly, that's what I think carries that movie.
This also gets a little bit into canon versus non-canon, because in what you could probably consider non-canon, you can get some of the old novelizations of episode 1, where the way they do novelizations for movies is the initial script is generally given to the writer, and they use that to write the book. So a lot of that stuff might not make it into the movie itself. And I remember reading a novelization of episode 1 where it starts off with Anakin losing the pod race that he was in before episode 1 technically started. Okay. And they do mention a couple of things that happen in that pod race in the movie, like he destroyed the pod he was in, and they go over that in the book. But technically, the race, canon wise, it happens, but the details of it may not necessarily be what was in the book. But they do go over several things like that in a lot of the novelizations. Like in that same novelization, they go over how Padme and all of them got into the palace. They sneak in through the vents, but they don't go over that in the movies. So there's things like that we can argue as to whether or not are canon versus non-canon, and the Force is filled with even more of that.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, the light side, dark side, Force aspect of what Star Wars is
right, because that canon gets really, really messed up. Because if you look at the initial canon from when Lucas was originally writing everything, way back in the day when he wrote the first Star Wars, in his view, balance was light side wins. Yeah. The light side winning is how you achieved balance. And as the years have gone on, balance has moved more from the light side being control, because at the time, light side and dark side, they didn't have a whole lot of emotions to them. Like emotions being implicit to the dark side, and then stoicism being the light side, was really more of a thing that they added in the prequels. But initially it was just light side versus dark, and they were kind of ambiguous.
Right. Well, that comes with the fact that there wasn't a actual order for either side, you know, necessarily in the original trilogy. You know, we don't see the Jedi Order or anything like that. We just have Yoda and Obi-Wan.
They don't even talk about the Sith Order that.
Yeah. Well, you can get access to a lot of. You can get access to it because they don't even mention the word Sith in the original trilogy.
Right.
But if you look at some of Lucas's notes, he doesn't mention that the dark side users are accessing the Force. They access something that he called the Bogon, which is the dark side of the Force, which is a weird word, and I'm pretty sure that's the reason why he didn't put it in.
I would have been okay with it. I mean,
it gives a name to what it is.
Yeah. Right. So, but the thing is, they did bring in the word Bogon in one of the TV series. It was Star Wars Rebels. Okay. And there was a neutral Force user. He wasn't a Jedi or a Dark Jedi. He was just a neutral Force user. He was just basically kind of this weird giant rock monster. And he mentions the Bogon, and he mentions the light side of the Force, but he doesn't refer to either of them as being good or bad, because he sort of sits in the middle. Right. He just views all of the Force as just being this thing that you can do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one thing about the light side and the dark side is most people correlate them together as being good or bad. I mean, I don't really
It's just
I don't-
religion.
Right, I really don't even look at it as good or bad, and people do correlate the light and the dark side as a religious style. Like,
Yes.
like
The thing is, it's not even just
heaven or hell, or
it's not even just religion, because it's a matter of how you think about, like, if you took like a real world religion. Real world religions aren't just, this is good and this is bad.
yeah.
They're full blown ideologies of, and you could if you talk to religious scholars and you give them difficult questions on, like, is this action good or bad, and it's sort of a gray area, they can go into things like what parts of their own ideology talk about what decisions would be better or worse out of those things,
Right.
and you can get a lot of that in Star Wars.
Yeah, especially from the non-canon side of it, because there's not really a whole lot of light shed on the dark side as being just a religion or just a
Right.
different viewpoint of what the Force can be used for or something like that. Unless you've read, like, the books that are non-canon, because there's X amount of different
honestly, the way I
novelization of it.
I viewed and the idea of balance being the use of both the light and the dark come from the non-canon side.
Yes.
And then it sort of moved its way into being more canon now. But the way I always viewed the Force in the non-canon area of Star Wars was the light side was more of a religion that had an ideology, and the dark side was more an ideology that had a religion.
Yeah, I get what you're trying to say there. Yeah, that's a very good point.
And honestly, if you look at a lot of the non-canon, you can kind of see the benefits and the drawbacks of both. Mm-hmm. Having an ideology that also has a religion allows you to get things done quickly. It allows you to assess problems quickly and address them, versus having a religion that has an ideology. You can address things more calmly with more organization and things like that. But so they have their benefits and their drawbacks, but they are different, not necessarily in an overt kind of way, but more of a subtle kind of way, in sort of like the results of their actions.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I think we just came to a lull. I don't even know, because that was very deep. But I mean,
well, it's definitely shown a lot. But the point that he made, we've mentioned in previous conversations, about the Bane trilogy. You kind of see that in that point of view, what he just said, the dark side is kind of more of like a ideology that has a religion, because Bane is kind of rediscovering what he believes to be the true reason for the dark side, and them conquering the Jedi and winning against the light is kind of like where the start of that religion comes from. But also, every Sith has their own individual ideology that kind of carries on that order throughout the years from that point.
And from reading the novels from the Bane trilogy, it kind of shows that he didn't get that by himself. I mean, he started out as being just wanted to be one of the most powerful Sith out there, and that was when the Sith was in order, and there was hundreds and hundreds of Sith, and they actually had a giant war between the Sith and the Jedi.
Funnily enough, I would say that would kind of be balanced, because until, not to spoil anything, but until Bane does his thing, the dark and the light are essentially balanced, because the war that's going on between the two sides is kind of like standstill.
Right. I mean, throughout it, they kind of hint towards that the light side's going to win, because the light side are working together. They're able to band together and work as a group, where the Sith are very individualistic.
And I think
it kind of shows the team versus an individual.
Right. It shows the religion of the Jedi versus the ideology that's going to be different to the individual of every Sith.
I think that's the main reason why they, like, their main excuse they give as to why it's not balanced is because even though there are a roughly equivalent number of Force users on either side, which means there is sort of a balance, there is chaos on one side that leads to just this never-ending sort of conflict. So, Revan, in a lot of the books and the video games and things that he was in, talks about balance being more of everyone using all of the parts of the Force, which would bring an end to the chaos because everyone would be just a Force user that has access to both the light and the dark.
But I mean, even if they had, and I think we've discussed this once before off podcast, off recording, that we've discussed that. But my thing is even if everybody was willing to use all sides of what the Force is, whether they use emotion or don't use emotion, there are going to be people that are partial to one side or the other.
Yes.
Even though they feel balanced within. I mean, you got people that are inherently good. I'm going to call them, for lack of terms, Boy Scouts, guys who want to just do good all the time.
Yes.
And then you're going to have people who are inherently evil, who are just inherently evil, even though they can access both sides of what we call the Force. They're gonna split, and that's just it's no real balance.
It's a matter of what you want to specialize in, because in Mace Windu, in and out of canon is a good example of this. 'Cause out of canon, I think he has a couple more things that really lend to this. I like his out of canon stuff, like Shatterpoint, which was a thing that he could do out of canon. And his particular lightsaber fighting style, out of canon,
is a more aggressive,
which is a very aggressive style, and I enjoyed that because it emphasized the fact that he could be a light side user that uses the dark side.
Yeah,
because he's not actually channeling the dark side; he uses the dark side energy that comes from his opponent and uses it to feed his fighting.
Yeah,
which is a very interesting way of doing things because it actually makes him weaker the less his opponent uses the Force.
Right.
Well, total random tidbit facto information about Mace Windu and his purple saber.
Or more so about Samuel L. Jackson than Mace Windu himself. But yes, continue.
So, people also always try to figure out why Mace uses a purple saber. Mm-hmm. Well, people try to say that, it's because he can use both the light and the dark side. Wrong. The reason why he has a purple saber, and he has actually said this on multiple interviews, is it's so he could literally find himself in the giant battle scene at the end of Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
And he wanted to be able to, there I am, I'm the only one with the purple saber. And
but
that's the only reason why he has a purple saber.
I believe I heard an interview where he said he actually got that idea from one of his kids, because his kid said you should have a purple lightsaber.
And it's an interview I've seen too, and it's actually from a major talk show from Britain.
Yeah, but honestly, a lot of that stuff, regardless of where it originates, it always ends up being something else, because now the purple lightsaber sort of in canon does sort of equal that. And yellow lightsabers, for example, those used to be a thing in non-canon that meant a thing that didn't mean anything in canon until the Clone Wars TV show, where they made all of the Jedi Sentinels, the House Guards, those guys in the masks.
The red one?
They're the guys that are sort of like I believe they wear white. They guard the Jedi Temple. The Jedi Temple guards.
Yeah. Okay.
So the Sentinels, they all have yellow lightsabers, and the reason is because it shows that they are a Sentinel of... They're basically the police.
There are different classifications, and specifically non-canon for different lightsaber
non-canon book that I've read actually said that the color of their saber is determined by the Force user while building their saber.
Yeah.
And in canon...
Because the crystals that are used actually make the saber almost a whitish color.
Well,
and
the saber crystals themselves are white, but in canon now they have a slightly different explanation as to how you get the lightsaber colors.
Okay.
And this was actually a pretty recent development. I believe this was last year, the year before, in combination with a in-canon book and episodes that were going on with Star Wars Rebels that were just coming out and explaining some of the stuff in that. In Star Wars Rebels, and even for anyone who's seen it, Ahsoka Tano, which was a character from the Clone Wars, who used to be a Jedi Padawan, is now just sort of a neutral Force user. And her lightsabers in Rebels they're white. And they explain that. Well, they don't explain it in the show, but they explain it in some of the novelizations and things, and sort of like the non-screen canon stuff, where she actually, those crystals that she has that are white used to be red. She got them from the Inquisitors.
Okay.
Right. Okay. The Inquisitors are the Empire's Force users that aren't actually Sith. They're just Force users that have red lightsabers. And they hunt down Jedi with Darth Vader. She defeated an Inquisitor, took their crystals, and purified them in the Force, which made them white. And apparently, if you change the color of a lightsaber crystal, they almost always end up white. But when you initially infuse the crystal with power, they get a color to begin with. So once a lightsaber goes back to being white, it can't change colors again. But initially, they go from white to something else.
Okay, and in another book,
reacting to the Force user's power itself.
In another book I read,
sort of, yeah, it's
another book I read involving what's his name? Freaking my God, I can't remember his name.
Lol.
Yeah.
Revan? Who are we talking about?
Revan, Plagueis, Bane.
The dual saber dude.
Maul.
Darth Maul. Thank you. My God, I can't remember why.
The dual sworded guy.
Yeah, that guy. Anyway, in a book I read
we were
about,
just having a conversation about Maul earlier today.
Yeah, we were, and I don't know why I couldn't remember. But anyway, back to what I was saying was I've read a couple books that involve Darth Maul exclusively and how he was trained and how Palpatine or Darth Sidious trained him, found him, and trained him.
Yeah.
They said that the reason why the Sith, most of the Sith, or even the Sith of after the Rule of Two came about, the reason why those crystals are red is because they're synthetic. They're not actual.
Right.
That was the old explanation for
harvested crystals. They were synthetically made, and the only color they could make was red synthetically.
Yeah, and the reason the now non-canon
that was weird
explanation as to why they needed synthetic crystals was because all of the planets that were Jedi controlled. So when the Sith first started coming about and they had these large armies that they needed to arm, they didn't have access to lightsabers. The reason why they the planets where all the naturally occurring kyber crystals were, the lightsaber crystals, were all Jedi controlled. So when the Sith were building up their armies and they had a bunch of people that required new lightsabers, they needed to get lightsaber crystals from somewhere. So someone developed a process to make synthetic kyber crystals, which out of canon had weirder properties compared to regular kyber crystals. In canon, now all the kyber crystals are the same. None of them were synthetic. They just come from wherever.
Red, blue, green.
They and depending on what year you're looking at, because in the Clone Wars, all the crystals had initial colors. They came with colors, and specific crystals would call out to specific people.
Yeah.
Now all the crystals start off as white, and when you make your lightsaber and you go through your whole process of building everything, your crystal gains a color. So now even the red sabers are the exact same as all the rest. But initially in non-canon, the synthetic crystals fed on power in a weird way, and if a light side Force user was using their lightsaber and they weren't careful, when a Sith was attacking them and they're feeding their own use of the Force through their crystal, they could actually turn off a lightsaber that they hit, which was a thing for a little while in non-canon. That kind of went away pretty quick because I think someone kind of figured that it was giving the Sith too much of a sort of headcanon advantage, because if all they had to do was feed a little bit of force through their lightsaber, they could turn off someone else's lightsaber unless they were protecting their lightsaber with the force, so they had to be constantly on guard, which caused them to be exhausted or whatever, and it was sort of a big mess. And I'm kind of glad they got rid of it, but it was interesting.
It would be cool to see them do a little bit more with something like that, if they used it like as kind of like only a really awesome Sith user could use something like that. Kind of
sure.
Save it for somebody that's a really big deal.
Well, and again, this kind of comes back to like the novelizations of the movies, and like that last fight scene between the duel of the fates between Darth Maul and Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. That scene where they're all sort of like in that weird section with all the laser walls, and they're all just sort of standing there waiting for them to stop being laser walls so they can fight again.
Yeah.
The novelizations go into kind of the details of what everyone's doing with their force powers, in addition to how they're fighting. So Qui-Gon, when he's sitting there,
he starts to meditate.
And in the movie, they don't really go into why he's doing that, but in the book, in the novelizations, they go into sort of the because obviously they had access to the notes of things that were going on. So they go into a bit of the fact that Qui-Gon is attempting to siphon off some of Darth Maul's anger, his dark side force use.
Yeah,
which
Qui-Gon's awesome.
So every time in the novelization that Darth Maul would do a strike, he would hit not just saber to saber, he would hit force to force, and his waves of anger and hate would sort of wash over Qui-Gon or Obi-Wan, and it would fatigue them a little bit more. And the entire thing of what Qui-Gon was doing is he was trying to pull as much of that away from Darth Maul as possible, so he could just so he's just pulling all of that into himself. So when he gets stabbed at the end, he's exhausting himself because he's now covered himself in that dark side energy.
Which is why,
but Obi-Wan has a better chance of fighting Darth Maul now that he's no longer getting washed over with all that dark side energy when he's fighting Maul.
I just want to say this right quick. This is just going to be a blatant bias that I have. Qui-Gon is the stuff. All right, if he had stayed around and like been there while Anakin was being trained, I kind of wanted to see what that could be like.
I think Anakin probably still would have turned out the way he did.
Well, yeah, but
I
the
think
story would still be different.
He would have had somebody behind him telling him to quit being a whiny little and suck it up.
I'm honestly less sure of that, because you have to remember, at the time, a lot of stuff that's not canon now was canon then.
This is true. Okay.
So things like
it wasn't until Disney took over that stopped.
Right.
Being
So
canon.
things like the Jedi Apprentice series, which is no longer canon, would have been canon then. And in the Jedi Apprentice series, you get to see Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan from the point where Qui-Gon takes Obi-Wan on as a Padawan and their adventures going on and being Jedis, which was a neat little series.
I bet.
But in that series, Qui-Gon does fall in love with another one of the Jedi, and they can't do anything with it. They can't be together and all this stuff. And she's honestly kind of hard-headed, and it's interesting. But if that had been canon at the time and Qui-Gon was still alive to go into movie 2 and movie 3, he's got a lot more understanding of some of the things that Anakin's going through at that point in time, because he went through it all already.
I wouldn't necessarily think that Qui-Gon's gonna just be there to, to call Anakin out on his emo-ness.
No.
I would say, because just watching the first episode alone, you already see him kind of step up to the Jedi Council and even say, like, I don't care how old he is, like, this is the chosen one, so you need to train him. He had his own ideology separate from the Jedi Council.
That is some of the interesting stuff, because that's some of the reason why I wish some of the non-canon stuff was still canon.
Yeah.
And there is some stuff in non-canon that I would like to see be canon or move toward more being canon. Like some of the stuff in Jedi Apprentice where he goes over why he picked Obi-Wan initially, but he didn't actually. In Jedi Apprentice, they go over how the age ranges and everything works. And basically, Obi-Wan was aging out. So if he wasn't picked to be an apprentice soon, he was going to have to leave the Padawan-style program and have to go do something else.
Well, in Obi-Wan, from what I understand from some explanations, I don't remember if it's canon or non-canon, Obi-Wan's actually one of the more powerful Jedis, regardless when it comes to the use of the Force. I mean, it may have been something that he picked up while he spent all that time on Tatooine and doing a lot of meditations and building his Force abilities.
Well, he was one of the more powerful Jedi, but he was in terms of the Jedi Council, he was probably in the top half. Mm-hmm. And I believe there was an explanation from some of the creators and the writers and things where he was probably even in like the top 5 in the Jedi Order.
I mean, he wasn't considered a master though, even in the.
He was a master.
Yes, he was. He was a master.
Well, no, not a master. Not the word that's not the word I'm looking for. I don't think. He wasn't part of the actual council.
He was.
Yeah, he was.
Towards the last couple,
in episode 3, he's on the council.
Yeah, he's on the council, recognized as a master.
Okay, so because in the end of episode 1 is when he was actually finally deemed worthy enough.
He was deemed a knight and took on a Padawan. Yes.
And took on a Padawan.
In episode 2, he is, I believe, recognized as a master, but not on the council. In episode 3, he's on the council.
Okay.
Correct.
So I guess I didn't pay enough attention, but then again, I'm not a big fan of
they
watching
those.
They
do have a fair amount of time skippage.
They did
between those movies. So the thing is, if you're not paying attention, you can completely miss the fact that
it's been a while.
That Anakin goes from being a Padawan in 2 to being a knight in 3, and he's been a knight for a while.
Right. Well, not only that is if you look at between 1 and 2, even the time gap is pretty big because he was like what 5?
Yes.
They said that he was 5 years old in episode 1.
No, he's like 11 or 10.
He's like 10 or 11 in episode 1 because he was too old according
You're
to
right.
the council.
You're absolutely right. That's right. I remember now. So he was like 10 or 11, and he's what in his late 20s, mid to late 20s by the time episode 2 rolls around.
I'm pretty sure the time gap.
They do give an exact number of years. When they're going to go protect Padme, they give an exact number of years that it's been since they've seen each other, and they hadn't seen each other since episode 1.
So I would say,
But I can't remember exactly how many years it was, but they do give a number.
I think, if I remember correctly, it's a decade, and then I would say probably between episode 2 and 3.
I'm reasonably confident that Anakin is supposed to be 19 in episode 2.
Right.
Don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure he's supposed to be 19.
Which explains why he's so emo.
But I think, and the reason why I think that is because I'm pretty sure that Luke was supposed to be 19 in A New Hope, and they were supposed to mirror them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, that makes sense.
So does that mean that Rey's supposed to be 19
in A New Hope?
Force Awakens?
In A New Hope,
I don't know how old Rey's supposed to be. I think.
In A New Hope, they do mention that he's getting to that age to where he should be leaving the house and being able to do what he wants. And in and even back in the 70s when that movie was made and created, like 18, 19 is when you finish high school and you tend to go out on your own, and that's what he's trying to do.
Luke is actively trying to leave the house. He's trying to go to the academy, which they don't really go over a lot of stuff in that movie either. The academy he's trying to go to is to go be a TIE fighter pilot.
Yeah, they're very vague in most.
Really?
Of the stuff. Yeah.
He's trying to go be a TIE fighter.
Well, I guess that makes sense because it's not really about joining the rebellion because he didn't even think about joining the rebellion.
No, he just wanted to fly.
Right, he just wanted to be a pilot. That's what he wanted to do.
Honestly, like I've heard some talk about how they don't go over Luke being a pilot very well in A New Hope. They do. They just don't do it very well.
He makes his comment. He makes a bunch of comments about being a pilot.
It's not just the comments. It's also like there's things that are missing from the movie that I'm pretty sure Lucas wanted to put in but never had a chance.
It's like
a lot.
I'm a fair pilot myself. Is one of the comments that I remember.
Whenever they're going over how to destroy the Death Star and you got to shoot this little port and everything and one of the guys says, 2 meters, that's impossible. And Luke says, I used to bullseye womp rats in my T-16 back home. They're not much bigger than 2 meters. And what the hell is a T-16? Mm-hmm. Well, a T-16 is a ship that he flies on a fairly regular basis. He has a model of it. If you remember near the beginning of the movie, he's playing with that little model ship. That's a model of a T-16.
And that's why we have Tim on the podcast, ladies and gentlemen, because he knows useless crap like this.
Right. It's just so all this setup is in the first movie for Luke to be a pilot.
Right.
They just don't give it to you.
But
very
isn't
well.
that model more of an X-wing over a TIE fighter?
No, it honestly looks more like an Imperial shuttle, but it's a T-16.
It's supposed to be.
Gotcha.
Because it's got the 3.
I think that's the most frustrating.
The 3 wing, the wings with the giant tail.
Yeah, it looks a lot like an Imperial shuttle, but it's supposed to be a T-16.
I think with what you kind of just said, kind of illustrates what, for me, the most frustrating difference between canon and non-canon is, and it's that canon, at least in the movies, is extremely vague.
It is.
And a lot of Star Wars fans, as much as they love it, they're not gonna necessarily read all the canon novelizations that you've spoken about. They're gonna be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to the theater and I'm gonna watch the Star Wars movie.
And I think that's one of the failings of the new trilogy versus the original trilogy. The original trilogy is missing a lot of things that could help give context, but the new trilogy is missing just context in general.
Well, and the thing is that
it's like the very concept of context is just sort of missing.
When you say new trilogy, you're talking 6, 7, or 7, 8, 9.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree very much.
The Rey story. Anyway,
there's been absolutely zero context.
Well,
they're just doing things, and we have to go.
And then
they just assume that
the prequel trilogy is filled with context, but it's all the wrong context.
Yeah, exactly.
There's problems with all the trilogies of Star Wars. Because they're just different problems.
Thing I think they expected was true fans are gonna go out and go above and beyond the movies. I mean, like, true fans are, but I'm gonna tell you right now, most true fans are lazy.
Well, they're
not going to go out and read the graphic novels that they wanted them to read. I mean, because
it's not just the graphic novels; it's the full-on novelizations. Because there are novels that took place between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. They came out after The Force Awakens to help give context of how you got from one to the other. They're kind of bad. They're not very good.
They try to shoehorn them into something that they shouldn't have been.
There's not a whole lot of real information in them. And in addition to that, all the real information that is in them it's not necessarily contradicted by Last Jedi, but they don't do anything with it. They just sort of leave it all hanging there.
Yeah,
I haven't read any of the novelizations.
Which is another reason why I didn't like Last Jedi. I know at the beginning of this I said this wasn't supposed to be reviews or anything. It's just supposed to be theory, but screw it.
My theory is that The Last Jedi is the worst Star Wars movie that I've seen.
For me, it's tied with Attack of the Clones, but
yeah.
But at least Attack of the Clones had Natalie Portman midriff in it. Like it's but the last Jedi, the main problem I had with it wasn't just that it didn't do anything. Like literally, if that movie hadn't happened, if you took out the last 2 minutes of Force Awakens when Rey finds Luke, you just edit it out. You can skip all of Last Jedi.
And just tell it, give us some big context and just
Luke
say
is
Luke
still
is dead.
not there. For all intents and
he's just
purposes,
not there.
he might as well be dead. Nothing else happens in Last Jedi.
Everything that does happen, plenty of things happen in Last Jedi, but every single bit of it is pointless.
Yeah. So what happens in Last Jedi? They meet an admiral who dies. They kill off characters we haven't seen again yet, like Admiral Akbar. So he might as well have been dead to begin with too. The whole casino planet thing, which was completely useless.
In what's her face?
Right.
Yeah, that was completely useless. There was no point to that whatsoever.
Luke is now no longer a thing, which he wasn't a thing to begin with.
Yeah. You brought him back to do nothing and then die.
Nothing happens in this movie except the one big bad guy is now no longer a thing. But you only saw him like twice to begin with anyway.
And you only saw him in person that one scene in the throne room where he dies.
In the original
nothing
trilogy
happens.
And even in the prequel trilogy, they do at least a decent job of like building up the Sith Lord.
Yeah.
In this one, they were just like, oh, this guy's in charge of Kylo Ren. But you don't even know what's going on with Kylo Ren, so why do you care about this guy for?
The thing is, it's weird. Okay, I will give Force Awakens this. It did more to try and push Snoke as a bad guy than A New Hope did for the Emperor. Can you tell me how many times they mentioned the Emperor in A New Hope?
0.
One.
One? Yeah, I see. I don't even remember that.
Tarkin mentions him one time during a scene that I'm pretty sure, like, almost no one remembers the very beginning of the scene because they kind of just gloss it over. It's when he's meeting with all of those other guys at the Death Star.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. And he starts it off with, you know, the Emperor is now the Emperor. He has disbanded the Republic. Blah blah blah. No one remembers that part because it didn't mean anything to anyone until the prequels came out.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, because nobody knew what the
No one knew anything about the Republic. No one knew anything about the Senate. No one knew anything about an Emperor. No one knew anything about any of that. But it happened. The Emperor was mentioned once.
It was kind of one of those like brief mentions of how the politics were.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
What's your question? Sorry.
This is kind of a question to pose, to you guys. Does the prequels have more of an advantage of being more watchable than the new trilogy because of the fact that it comes before the original trilogy instead of after it?
Honestly, I think the prequels have the advantage of having been out already, and even the bad parts of the prequel trilogy. It's been around so long that even the people that hate it are just sort of over it. You can't carry that kind of hatred for something so mediocre for that long.
And I'm going to tell you guys right now, my favorite parts about the prequel trilogy has nothing to do with the story. They finally put really cool saber battles, which is what everybody's looking for.
Yeah, well, for me,
the best saber battle in the original, I'm going to call them the original trilogy, but the original trilogy back made in the 70s was the saber battle between Luke and Vader in Empire, and then the saber battle between Luke and Vader in Return of the Jedi. And they were not that great. They were just basic.
I will agree with you that the lightsaber battles from the prequels are flashier and they look neat, but they feel less weighty.
There's less importance to what they are.
Yeah, but the thing is, everyone remembers the lightsaber battle from A New Hope. They remember the lightsaber battle from Empire Strikes Back. They remember the lightsaber battle from Return of the Jedi because they were important.
Yeah,
absolutely. That's my point. Had. That's my point. Is that they brought this flashy ability to run a saber battle, which is it's just making things more kung fu-esque.
Okay. Here's how I'm gonna describe.
Yeah.
Here's how I'm gonna describe this. Okay. Think of a lightsaber battle as a bag. Right.
A bag.
A bag.
B-A-G. A bag.
You from Boston?
Yes. Where did it stop?
Oh well, now it's going again. Continue.
Okay. So the lightsaber battles are like a duffel bag. So if you look at the original trilogy, the duffel bag is filled with heavy crap. Right. This bag is heavy. You can feel it. It is weighty. It's got some weight to it.
Yeah.
The lightsaber battles, for the most part, in the prequels, are just an empty bag.
Well, you got to think about it. It's like the duffel bag that you're talking about in the original trilogy is like a military duffel bag. You can fit whatever the heck you want into it. It's full of useful equipment, but it's just basic. It's this OD green basic bag, but it's got so much stuff. It's the most useful bag you'll ever own.
Right.
The bags that you're carrying from the prequel trilogy are these flashy Gucci, Coach, freaking high-end, freaking $1 million bags.
So they make a lot
that
more
are
money,
super
but they ain't worth a
flashy.
damn.
They're super flashy, but they don't
tactical
hold.
Gucci bags.
They're super
tactical Gucci bags that Obi-Wan and Anakin carry.
They are
with
super
them.
flashy. They got their
prequel
gold
movies.
clints to it, and they got the style. But what's in them is absolutely meaningless. Like there isn't as much weighty.
I would sort of.
That's perfect. I love that analogy. I absolutely love it.
The way I would weight the individual bags of the prequel trilogy, that the Duel of the Fates in Phantom Menace has got some stuff in it, right? It's got some stuff in the bag.
I'd say there's at least 2 significant Star Wars.
So you're looking at that one like as
saber
like a Mary Kay bag, or what is that? Is it Mary Kay? Is that what? Yeah, Mary the Spade or whatever.
Dude,
whatever.
I don't know.
So,
you know way more about.
I
This
don't know that much about designer bags.
Yeah,
but so it's got some stuff in it. Like you can tell that this is trying to lead you somewhere. There's something in it.
Right.
There's at least a map in this bag.
But it's still flashy as heck.
Right. But the bag for Attack of the Clones
is the least heavy.
Empty.
Yes.
Absolutely
There's
empty.
nothing.
That's the one that's fucking been bejeweled.
battling.
It's bejeweled. It's got gold.
If there's anything in this bag, it is nothing but glitter.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
because,
you know what?
because
You're
truthfully,
right. Because although
that fight with Dooku at the end, even before Yoda gets there, it's still super flashy. It's like it shows Dooku taking on Obi-Wan and Anakin, and Anakin's supposed to be one of the best saber duelists outside of Yoda.
Yeah.
And the whole, Jedi Order.
But it's filled with nothing. You're just watching people, twirl around glow sticks.
So Obi-Wan gets hurt and he throws Anakin his sword. So now you got super flashy because you got Anakin dual wielding swords.
It's just the
it still gets his butt
gratification of the moment. It's like, okay, he's got 2 lightsabers.
And then you have that epic moment where Yoda just kind of limps his way into the freaking room and is like,
but wait, there's more.
There's more. He does his little catches Dooku's lightning, and he's like, oh, I guess our use of the Force is not going to show who's better. And then all of a sudden you get Yoda pull out his little saber, and then you're like, oh my God, Yoda's gonna fight! Heck yeah, let's do this!
And then what happens is they put the bag on a stick and just twirled it around for about 5 minutes.
Heck yeah, and all he did was jump around like a little freaking frog.
Well, I tell you what. All right, so this is from a interesting perspective. Hearing you guys talk about this, I was like 8 years old when Attack of the Clones came out, so it doesn't have meaning. I agree with everything you just said. But it still has it plays its role, and that is to make money. And that's why it's a Gucci, Prada, whatever the F bag. Because those bags make money.
Heck yeah.
Even if they don't mean a whole lot.
And
because my 8-year-old self was like all about that crap. I was Anakin all the way when he was using both lightsabers.
For anyone in the audience who's into tactical things or guns or anything, basically what I'm saying is the original trilogy battles are kind of like a useful pack that you can put on your back and it's sturdy and you can put stuff in it, versus like Tactigucci that you can see, like the super
Gucci.
unnecessary expensive crap that you can find in the world of tactical gear. Like backpacks that are $100 backpacks that you pay $500 for.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, and then to move on to the next battle, the big battles. I mean, there was some weight to these. To the ones in Attack,
Revenge of the Sith, they add a little bit more weight.
There's a little bit more weight
because
to it. This is when they start
honestly,
to make
it carries
more.
the story
Revenge of the
further
Sith,
a lot more than
Revenge of the Sith has some of the worst dialogue, but some of the best acting in the prequel trilogy. Anytime that people had to act without talking, like when Padme tells Anakin that she's pregnant, you get to see their faces go through these gambits of emotion where they're both excited and terrified.
Well,
and they don't say a word.
Right quick.
That's good acting.
The part,
but the words are terrible.
The part, yeah, and again, another example, even before that, earlier in the movie, the part when Anakin beheads Dooku, everything that old emo actor, whatever his name is, that plays Anakin, is doing with his face is actually pretty damn stellar.
Hayden Christensen is a great emotive style actor.
And if you
and they made him talk, and they gave him the worst things to say.
Yeah, but when he's just like, it's not the Jedi way, I'm just like, Anakin, we know you don't care.
Well, and that's just it. If you go back and rewatch that scene, and I'm going to tell you guys to do this, because, yes, weirdly enough, I've done this at work. I turned it on, and it was on. If you watched just that scene, no sound. Even turn the subtitles on.
Yeah, heavier.
Tim is correct. The emotions within the face, like you can see the struggle in Anakin's face.
The way they emote, the way they move, the way the
camera angles that they put between him and the Emperor, and just kind of like
and a lot of the Emperor, he's restrained to a chair.
Yeah, he
does some great acting.
He does some great acting in that scene. The acting in Revenge of the Sith is good acting, but the overall dialogue that was written for them to carry them from one scene to the next was kind of bad.
With the exception, in my opinion, and you can disagree
some of it was
with
really
me
bad,
if you want. I feel like the one scene that has decent enough dialogue and the emoted acting is the battle between Windu and the Emperor in the throne room, or in the.
That's a very good scene,
because the whole he's too dangerous to be kept alive, like that needed to be said. I feel like you're right. Out of that trilogy, Attack of the Clones is absolute garbage.
Honestly, they would have been better off doing it in sort of like a silent film style. If you think about like silent films, the only words that you see are the really, really important words because they know it's going to have to take up screen time because they have to flash up the words.
Yeah.
So they had to restrict everything down to only the most important dialogue is going to be seen.
So I think it's funny. I have not seen episode 9, even though it is out now, because it's the 22nd. So it's the second. The final movie of the new trilogy is out in theaters currently. I have not seen it. I'm not all terribly excited, if I'm being honest, but I think it's kind of honest.
I don't think any of us have seen it yet.
It's pretty funny to me.
I'm scheduled to go see it shortly.
What would you think? What would you say is your favorite, or in your opinion, the best out of the original trilogy? The best out of those three?
The original trilogy?
Yes.
Honestly, the best movie to me in the original trilogy is A New Hope, and I'm gonna say why. It's a complete story.
Okay.
Beginning to end, it is one complete story, and it's just sort of self-contained.
What about you? What's your favorite out of the three?
I am very partial to Empire.
Okay, and that's honestly, I'm not surprised that you said A New Hope because you're always just you carry a different bag, okay, than everybody else.
I love Empire Strikes Back.
We both just on the other two trilogies. We just sat here and basically crapped on the middle movie of the other two trilogies. But I would say it's probably the overwhelming opinion that Empire is most people's favorite Star Wars movie.
I'm going to explain why.
Or just at least their favorite out of the original trilogy.
Let me at least give an explanation. Most people like Empire because of the whole announcement of who Vader is to Luke.
Well, that and the downtrodden ending where you actually feel like the rebels are losing.
Right. Yeah. Mine has nothing to do with that. Mine has to do with seriously the very beginning of the movie. That whole being on Hoth and having to deal with, in the very beginning, this huge blizzard, and they're trying to hide out. That is one of my favorite stuff within the movies.
I do enjoy the beginning of Empire Strikes Back because they've just achieved their greatest victory, followed by just a devastating loss.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things. It shows that even in war, just because you achieve one victory does not mean you've won the war.
Right.
Yeah.
They took out the Death Star in the previous movie, and they start out the next movie with a complete devastation of almost their whole forces.
Yeah,
But you can see winning battles versus losing the war in history, like the 100 Years' War between Britain and France. Britain won the overwhelming majority of the battles throughout that war, but they technically lost the war because they didn't win the right battles.
So
Right.
I mean, and there's a lots of other parts within Empire that I really enjoy. I mean, you're looking at like, the training of Luke through Yoda.
I will say, Empire is probably the worst offender when it comes to missing context in the original trilogy as well.
You're probably right about
Because
that.
they don't give you any sort of feeling of time frame.
He
So
just disappears at Dagobah.
he disappears at Dagobah. They go to Cloud City. All this stuff, but they don't tell you how long anything takes. Now
Yeah.
you can if you really want to be that super dedicated fan, you can start breaking down how much time everything's taking, because when they're on their way to Cloud City, they don't have a hyperdrive, so they have to fly there at slower than light speed,
Right.
which is going to take a long time.
No kidding, man.
Right?
Yeah, I
So
never even
they could have
realized
literally
that.
been on their way to Cloud City for months.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But they don't give you any idea of that kind of time
because
frame.
they never
There's
even
no
in
tell you
telling
that-
how long it could take Luke to learn how to do a
Which-
backflip with a green
You
monkey on
can
his
actually see
Yeah.
problems like this in terms of time frame in other movies as well, like Aragon. Him training in that movie, you get no sense of how long it took,
and even in the books, they jump around a lot in the books.
but you get an idea of the time frame.
Right. An
Versus-
idea.
Yeah, and a lot of movies are like that, especially when it like the reason why I think Rocky 1 really changed the game. They made that montage and it gave you a feeling of time passing.
Yeah, and they did that in most of the Rockies.
Yeah, but they gave you a feeling of time passing, so
Right.
something's getting achieved and not just happening all at once. There is time passing from now to then
Right.
that a lot of movies were missing. They couldn't find ways to show time passing.
All right.
All right.
Well,
yeah.
we have a lot more that we could talk about in this subject. I mean, and
I'm pretty sure we went way off topic.
we were way
Well,
off topic because we said at the very beginning of this we're not going to critique movies. We ended up critiquing movies, but anyway.
Well,
so
it kind of goes into the theory of it too.
Right.
We talked
Yeah.
about the trilogies, not just. Well, I mean, we took a dump on some of the movies.
so
we broke down some others.
we're
Yeah.
gonna we'll have to breach this subject again, and we will definitely breach this subject
Like-
quite a bit because
Like we
it's
said, Star
very
Wars is a
passionate.
huge topic with a lot of places to go.
This is a huge passion to us three. Harrison is not here today, but we all know who Harrison is. Harrison's our great producer here. But Harrison's not a big, huge Star Wars fan, which we understand because not everybody is. But for the three of us, like Star Wars is such a great
Universe.
topic to talk about because there's so much controversy
Yeah.
and everything that what it
more
is.
and more created every single time there's a new
And
movie.
Right.
honestly,
So-
there are like I'm not even sure Star Wars is unique in that aspect anymore.
No,
Because you get things like Harry Potter.
right, which
Which-
we'll breach that subject too.
At
Yeah,
some
but
point,
Harry
obviously.
Potter is reaching a lot of that too because you have the original, which is the 7 books and the 8 movies, versus the things that come after. So you have their version of the prequels, which is Fantastic Beasts,
Right.
and you have their version of the sequels, which is that stupid play.
Well, that stupid play was not even written by.
It was.
It wasn't even
It
written
wasn't-
by
it wasn't
her. It
written
was written by a
it wasn't written
fan.
by Rowling, but
Yeah.
it was kind of cleared by her. She
Yeah,
went
it
over a
was
bit with them.
okayed by J.K.
It was okayed, but truthfully,
I'm
most
pretty
people
sure-
just take that cursed child and
Like,
throw it out the window.
Honestly, it's kind of like Dragon Ball Z, and then the sequel being either Dragon Ball Super or Dragon Ball GT. GT was supervised by Akira Toriyama for like the designs and overall story, and then he just stopped showing up, and they progressed the story however they felt, and it just went off the rails.
Yeah.
So okay,
That's kind of what Cursed Child is. It's the Harry Potter version of Dragon Ball GT.
If
Okay.
you listen to Cursed Child or read Cursed Child or go watch the play or whatever the hell you do to consume this, Just act like you've never seen a Harry Potter movie before in your entire life, and you know nothing about it, and you might kind of enjoy it.
Okay, so we're going to leave that, because this is a Star Wars podcast, not Harry Potter. But anyway, so to sum up everything is that, yes, we are going to rebroach this topic of Star Wars on probably multiple different podcasts throughout our whole existence. We'll do different sides of it. We did a little bit of theory and lore.
Crap on the movies, or
we'll do our critiques because eventually all of us will have seen them all, and then we'll do our critiques on the new movies. There's that new series Mandalorian out, which I would like to do a full podcast on. Maybe the three of us, since the three of us are trying to keep up with it. Tim hasn't watched any of them yet, but he'll catch up.
I'm currently waiting for them to be finished with season 1. Then I'm going to watch them all.
Right, which is fine.
That way I can keep all the information fresh.
So, with all that said, we're going to go to our recommendations for the week.
Yeah, my recommendation is to watch Mandalorian, Star Wars fan or not. Like, I think that I could show, I've already seen it on Facebook and other social media. I'm seeing people going absolutely nuts about Baby Yoda. But the thing is like, they're also watching and enjoying the story, even though they're not really Star Wars fans necessarily. So that would be my recommendation, to kind of maybe bridge yourself into this world if you're not already into it.
I have 2 recommendations based on what you feel like doing more. If you're more of a video gamer, then I would recommend something that's no longer canon, which is Knights of the Old Republic.
Oh, yeah.
If you have a computer, you can run it. It doesn't take very much power, and is a fun game.
It's also available through the Game Pass on Xbox Live.
Yeah, it's available a lot of places. You can find it. It's a fun game, and it goes into a lot of really neat, no longer canon stuff that are really fun ideas. But if you wanted to go more canon, I really recommend watching Star Wars: The Clone Wars TV show. They're supposed to be doing a 7th season here soon, and it is probably the best thing to come out of that whole prequel thing, is that show.
All right, my recommendations are actually books. I have a tendency to read more than I watch. I have a lot of time to listen more than that, but I listen to audiobooks quite a bit. The Darth Bane series, non-canon, great series. It kind of tells you the story of how the Sith became what they are in the modern compared to what they were during the Old Republic.
It's a non-canon explanation of
the Rule of Two.
What's going on in the canon movies.
Right. And they explain what the Rule of Two is, and you'll never hear that in the canon movies. I also want you guys to try to pick up the book called Kenobi. It actually portrays Obi-Wan Kenobi after it comes... Story-wise, it comes after Revenge of the Sith, and it kind of shows you what Obi-Wan Kenobi does on Tatooine after he drops off Luke to his aunt and uncle on Tatooine.
And also, I would like to say, did you think we missed anything? Or would you like to hear something that we didn't talk about yet? Or did you think we were wrong about something? Send us a message, email, comment, whatever. That'd be great.
Yeah, we're on social media. You find us on Twitter and all that good jazz. We'll give you some more information on that as it shows up. If not, it'll be in the
description.
In the description. You'll have links in the description below. Please feel free to comment on anything or tell us what you want us to talk about next. I mean, we have a bunch of subjects we want to talk about.
But
at some point,
for suggestions.
We are definitely open for suggestions, something you guys want to hear. So, hope to hear from you guys, and we will talk at you later.
So Star Wars is in space?
Yeah.
You know what else is in space?
Dragon Ball Z
is in space.
Yeah.
Oh,
Dragon Ball Evolution
Dragon Ball
is
Evolution.
also though.
Well, but Dragon Ball Evolution is still Dragon Ball. Okay. So it's all connected.
It's all connected. That's right.
It all comes together.